just want to go back to the euro dollar. It's not the expansions of the Fed's balance sheet that causes inflation because it's just a token swap.
Right.
But the expansion of the euro dollar does drive inflation because that does put more money. That is always expanding because it's fractional reserve lending. It's essentially actually is pushing more money out there.
Yes. Because you're creating loans, you're creating money, usable money that's on the ledger system. So there's more ledger essentially available to be used across the global economy.
Okay, so if you go to Argentina with their whatever 50, 60, 70% inflation, or you go to Turkey with their, I think they hit it 90%, why are they seeing massive high inflation?
Because they can't get dollars. As paradoxical as that sounds.
Is it really?
Yes. Because in a restricted monetary environment, what happens? The global banks that are restricted in the amount of ledger money they can create, the amount of monetary resources they have available, they're going to be very picky about where they distribute their chips, so to speak.
In this opaque euro-dollar system, you mean?
Right.
So what, Turkish banks aren't part of this?
They are, but everybody needs dollars. Everybody's connected to the euro-dollar system. However, if you're a euro-dollar provider, you're not going to lend to Turkey because it's incredibly risky. Remember what I said, safety and liquidity are the priority.
Yep.
Argentina and Turkey do not qualify as safety and liquidity. And the more constricted the eurodollar system is, the more that don't qualify in terms of safety and liquidity. They draw a hard line. And so you see Argentina, Turkey, Sri Lanka, Beirut. Suddenly these countries can't get any dollars, which means they can't really transact on the global marketplace, which leads to all sorts of economic, social, and political consequences.
And again, they can't, is this the banks can't get dollars or the government? Who can't get the dollars?
The local banks.
The local
So the Turkish banks who need dollars to provide to the Turkish corporate sector, so the Turkish corporate sector can transact in dollars in the global marketplace, because you need dollars to transact. You can't use yuan unless you're transacting bilaterally with China, which that's all sorts of dangerous too. So you need dollars. Everybody needs dollars. It goes back to what we said. A reserve currency is a currency that is available and usable everywhere.
But so in Turkey, these banks can't get dollars. Therefore, they're having to buy with the Turkish lira, which is higher risk. Therefore,
the price
goes up
and the lira
goes down.
Yep.
And therefore, that has a compounding effect because next time they want to buy, well, your lira's dropping, I want even more.
And you're even riskier. So I'm going to charge you an even higher premium just to even talk to you.
Huh.
So the eurodollar is at the center of all of this. And safety and liquidity which are the exact opposite of what we need for economic growth. We need risk-taking, animal spirits, as John Maynard Keynes said. And with a liquidity environment and a broken eurodollar system.
Are you a Keynesian?
No.
Okay.
But, I mean, John Maynard Keynes and everything that's done in his name, some of the worst stuff imaginable.
Okay.
However, that doesn't mean everything the guy said we should just throw out.
Okay, fair.
He has a lot of good ideas, like liquidity preferences. His liquidity preferences theory explains pretty much everything that's going on now.
Okay, so this takes me back to this general fear of Weimar-style hyperinflation becoming an issue in Western liberal democracies.
Right.
And you actually fear the opposite, which is deflation.
Which is exactly what's happened over the last 15 years.
We have had deflation.
Yes.
But that chart says...
That's the U.S. You got to remember, this is a global system. We've had disinflation in the U.S. and outright deflation in other parts of the world, like Europe, Japan. So other major economies.
So Japan has stagflation?
No.
No?
No. Japan has a lack of economic growth and deflation.
Okay. UK has had GDP growth.
But it's not at the same rate it used to be. Again, you can see these. You see growth.
So it's
2007, 2008 is like somebody flipped a switch. It's not like growth stops entirely.
So growth is slowing.
It's slowed dramatically.
Okay.
So in the U.S., you'll see GDP growth go like this. Then there's a 2008 crash, and then it never recovers. Even though GDP before 2020 was at record highs, it was nowhere near it would have been had the economy continued to grow at the same pace if 2008 never happened. In fact, it's so big, so different that people don't even believe it when you draw the chart. We're about 6 trillion short in GDP after a dozen years of lack of economic growth. So everybody thinks the economy was booming and inflationary. Heard all that crap in 2017, 2018, the last crypto bubble in 2017 in particular. Inflation's coming, globally synchronized growth, recovery, all that stuff. It never happened because it wasn't true. It was all just smoke and mirrors.
Okay. So if that is true, is how much is this to do with the productivity in the world? We've certainly seen a massive increase in financial products and services over tangible products and services. Is that anything part of it? Is that
That's the Cantillon effects of the Eurodollars, right?
but is that part
By
of the
being
reason?
able to create money, they essentially, banks have created their own place in the world at the center of the world. So once you become the money printer and intermediation function, you need to create products. Essentially, that's what Alan Greenspan was saying. Proliferation of financial products is so extraordinary. We can't use money as a monetary policy because we don't do money.
Right. So the risk is global recession,
Yes.
deflation,
Yes.
which is something we are seeing. We are seeing GDP growth slow.
It'll be a lot more for the last half of this year.
And is that an unstoppable force?
Yes.
Okay. So if this isn't even a case of, okay, this is what might come, this is what we should do, no, this is coming.
I think
And is this a reset?
Depends on what you mean by reset.
Well,
Well,
like-
there's all sorts of connotations.
Yeah,
to
no,
that term.
forget the
Great
Charles
Reset, yeah.
Schwab and his bullshit. I'm thinking more. We talked about we had a massive period of prosperity and 20 years of economic growth. Is this essentially our rebalancing period now? And do these periods tend to match, or can it will happen in like 5-10 years?
Well, we're still in the same 15-year funk before we ever got to COVID.
Okay.
And I don't understand why people thought we would shut down the global economy and come out of it better than we came into it. So we were already in a deflationary funk by 2019, one that had been extended for almost a dozen years by that point. Then we made it worse.
Oh, so they're kicking the can down the road.
Not even kicking the can down the road. Everybody confused CPIs for economic recovery.
Okay.
And like I said, when you look at the supply-demand curve, we actually have less economic activity but higher prices, which people think that the economy was red hot. It wasn't. We haven't recovered from 2020, and before 2020, we hadn't recovered from 2008. We're actually ratcheting downward.
So if you look at history, are we heading to a 1940s style depression?
Well,
What are your
40s
predictions?
wasn't a depression. 40 was the
30s, wasn't it?
1930s.
Yeah.
I think we've been in a more like an 1880 style depression for the last 15 years. My podcast co-host Camila Kalinowski calls it the silent depression. So ever since August 9th of 2007, we've been in a silent depression.
And when you say silent depression, is it because we're getting poorer, but we think we're getting richer?
We're getting poorer, but nobody really knows it. Well, I think people understand something is not right, but they can't put their finger on it. Which is why people have, crypto enthusiasm has become what it is, because I think intuitively people understand there is something wrong here, not just in the economy, not just in the finance, but in the monetary system itself. We just don't know what it is because we keep getting bad information. We keep getting bad media signals. We keep getting, the wrong ideas that were implanted in our heads from the very beginning of Economics 101.
We seem to have more money, but we don't seem to be saving.
We're not doing anything.
We seem to be
right?
richer, but our kids can't afford homes.
Yeah.
The middle class
Where
is
did
having the fuck squeezed out of it.
Where did it go?
I don't know. You tell me. That's why you're
That's
here.
why
I
I'm
don't
telling you.
fucking know.
What happened was, we had maybe the illusion of prosperity, especially in the 2000s, in the 21st century, and then it all just fell apart, and it's never been put back together. And that's the thing about inequality. As you said before, people who did really well up until 2007, they're still doing really well.
Yeah.
They're fine.
Yeah.
However, when you get into these depressions, what happens every time is that, and this is another thing John Maynard Keynes was correct about when he said deflation is by far the worst evil.
Okay.
Because deflation means who pays for that deflation? Not the rich person, not even the business owner. Workers do.
Yeah.
Workers get the short end of the shaft in any deflationary environment. And what have we seen?
Why? To explain why, though.
Because what happens is just simply liquidity risks and things like that. Business owners can't afford labor.
Right.
They can't afford to pay labor what labor demands, and therefore it becomes a sort of a vicious cycle of self-reinforcement. So employment workers suffer in every deflationary depression. What have we seen over the last 15 years? In the United States, the labor force participation rate has plummeted. So silent depression, again, The unemployment rate, which doesn't take into account the participation problem, looks terrific. So if we ignore all those millions of workers who left the labor force because there are no jobs, everything looks great. But those millions of people still exist.
Yeah.
They don't have a job. They've gone 15 years without it. And then the labor force participation fell again in 2020 and still hasn't come back.
But there's all these unfilled jobs. You go to restaurants and they're saying, yeah, we've got to reduce service because we can't find staff. You've got these baggage handlers. You've got all these.
There's no such thing as a labor shortage. A labor shortage is cured in a second if you pay the market clearing wage.
So you mean get rid of minimum wage?
I'm not talking about minimum wage. Obviously, businesses are not paying the wage that the market demands to get people out of their homes and working again. And people think that's because the government paid them to sit on their couch, but that's not really the case.
What is it then?
It's, again, John Maynard Keynes' deflationary environment. Companies can't afford to pay workers.
Okay. But hold on, but they're advertising jobs.
They're advertising jobs, but what are they paying?
Below the rate that they need to pay.
It has to be below the market clearing rate. Otherwise, workers would be in there in a second.
But there are people who could work if they weren't receiving money from the government.
Those anecdotes are popular, and they've been used to try to explain why the participation rate remains low. And they've been primarily forward the idea of this great resignation too. That has been forwarded by the mainstream to essentially try to explain what otherwise would be a deflationary outcome.
So
because we don't believe, media doesn't believe in this deflationary stuff. This is, the Fed created, Jay Powell sat on 60 Minutes and said, I flooded the world with dollars. So that must be what happened. And everything that doesn't agree with that statement, which is basically everything, we have to find a way to explain it. And so the labor shortage is one way to try to explain low participation rate, even though the participation problem is simply repeating the same thing that we saw in the aftermath of the 2008-2009 Great Recession, because it wasn't a recession.